All right, guys, time for another day in the life of programming learning. So, today we're going to be doing section 2 of the introduction to HTML. So, I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. So, let's go ahead and looks like this is about an hour and 19-minute stream here.
All right, so now let's tackle what exactly is HTML and how do we use it to structure our websites. So no matter what you use as your browser, it could be Chrome, it could be Safari or Firefox, they all have a single purpose, and that's to interpret your files, such as your HTML files, your CSS files, your JavaScript files, into a website that should be displayed. For example, we've got a little bit of HTML code here that says that our website should have a title called Hello, and in the body there should be a heading that says Hello World. So if we pass that code into our browser, it will open it and display it like so, with the title of the website usually on the tab bar, and that H1 or that big heading showing up in the body of our website. So before we dive deep into this, it's really important to remember that HTML is the foundation of all websites. So, for example, you won't see websites that are created using just a CSS file or just a JavaScript file, but you can create websites using just an HTML file. Now, it might not look great, it'll probably look like it came from the 90s, but it does enable your website to display text or various elements such as images or forms or tables, depending on how you code up the HTML file. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And the really important part here is the word markup, because there's many markup languages. For example, you might have heard of things such as XML, Extensible Markup Language, or GML, Generalized Markup Language, and all of these languages share a common history. They're based off the markup that used to be put into manuscripts, where editors would mark up the manuscript and either specify changes to the author or specify structure and layout to the publishers. So for example, you might have the squiggly line that shows the publishers that this part should be printed in bold, or this part should be printed in italics. And HTML works in much the same way. You can specify the layout and structure of your website by using HTML tags. So if you head over to your browser and go to a website called codepen.io, then...
All right, so she recommended that I be in Chrome, so I'm going to go ahead and open Chrome now. That way. And I guess this weekend I'll work on getting that, getting it so that I can use both of my screens at the same time, so that I can move back and forth without having to stack pages on top of each other. Codepen.io. There we go. All right, here we go.
And we can have a look and have a play around with real live HTML. So you don't have to sign up. Just head over to codepen.io and then hit create new pen. And then we're going to change the view to a format like this. So this is the live version of our website. And these are the places where
She said create a new pin, but I do not see such words on this screen. Maybe if I push it all the way out, maybe it's hidden. No. So maybe they've tried it since changed it since she's worked on it. Since she's big the course, because I don't see anything. However, this does seem to be pretty cool. So I might sign up for this. I think I might sign up for this. This looks like it's going to be pretty cool. However, I have no clue because she says something about creating a new pin. But oh, here we go. Pins. No, they didn't do anything. Search pins. No. I'm just going to watch it at this point because I don't know.
Put our code. So as you can see, CodePen lets you put in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which will together get interpreted and get shown on the left as your website. Now, as we're only working with HTML at the moment, I'm going to minimize the CSS and JavaScript sections, and I'm just going to work from the HTML section. Now, we're going to need some text to work with, or to have something which we can give structure to. If you head over to gutenberg.org/ebook/1661, you get taken to The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. So one of my favorite books of all time. If you have a look down here, you can see that you can view the book as plain text, or you can read this book online as HTML. So this is what the plain text looks like. It has all of the text in the book, but absolutely no structure. But when we have a look at the HTML file, you can see that it has laid out the book with a structure that is more human readable. And this is what we're going to replicate using HTML. So if you go ahead and just copy this part, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and you copy it and place it into your pen, so in the HTML section here. Now, you can see that all of this text gets put onto the screen with absolutely no structure. And in order for this to start looking like this, we're going to start adding a little bit of HTML. So the first thing we can see is that this is the largest heading on the page. So we can make our website look like that also by adding an H1 tag into our HTML. So the tags start with angular brackets and end with angular brackets, and in the middle is the type of element or the type of tag you want to use. Now, it's really important that when you open tags that you should also close them, because as you can see here, I've got an open tag, but I have yet to close it, and it thinks that the entire contents of my page should be made into the largest heading possible. And that's not what I want. I only want it for this section, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. So in order to close the tag, it's the same angle brackets, but then I have to use a / and then write H1. So now only this part is an H1 or a large heading. Now if we have a look at the other parts, I would say that this word by is a little bit smaller than the author name. So let's structure this as a heading also, but let's make it a subtitle. So let's make it a slightly smaller heading. And to do that, we can simply wrap this text around an H2 tag. And now we have Sir Arthur Conan Doyle as a heading, but in a smaller size and shown with less importance than the big title. So now, finally, we have this word by, and I reckon that's one size smaller than this heading. So let's go ahead and wrap this inside an H3. I hope you're starting to get the gist. The heading tags get smaller as the number goes up. So for example, if I change this to an H4, it gets even smaller, H5, smaller still, and all the way until H6, which is the smallest font size for the heading element. Now, if you keep going to H7, you'll notice that it doesn't do anything anymore. It doesn't change the heading size. And that's because the heading elements only go from H1 to H6. Now, how do I know that, I hear you ask? So this is a good point in the course to introduce documentation. And the reason why I'm talking about it so early on is because of how important it is to your journey as a web developer. So one of the key skills in becoming a great web developer, or in fact any sort of programmer, is getting good at finding out how you can help yourself. And a lot of that involves getting good at Googling. How do you find the specific piece of information that's going to help you achieve what it is that you want, or help you understand what it is that you want to know? So in this case, we're talking about headings, and we are using HTML. And I'm going to add in the name of the documentation that I prefer to use, which is MDN, and it stands for the Mozilla Developer Network. So the same people who made Firefox, for example. So if I go ahead and hit enter, you see a whole bunch of results come up. And the most relevant for us is the H1 to H6, and it talks about headings. So if we click on that, you can learn more about the heading elements used in HTML, and they even have example code snippets that show you what it would look like rendered in a browser. Now, there's a couple of sources for documentation. One is, of course, MDN. Another one is called W3 Schools. So let's see if we tried W3 Schools with HTML, and we're talking about headings, right? Let's see what we get here. So HTML headings is the first result that comes up. And similarly, you've got the code examples, you've got the results, and you've got a little bit of notes that tell you how you should be using your headings. Both of these places have a lot of really useful usage notes, and it's worth reading through when you're first coming across a particular element. That way, you'll have a good foundation of knowledge when you start to build and create your own websites. So I want to show you one last resource that I quite like using, which is called devdocs.io. And this is basically a website that puts together a lot of the useful documentation in a structure that I find to be quite handy. So if we have a look inside the HTML5 tab, and we go into the elements, we can see that there's a total of 135 elements. And if you scroll down, you can see that we've got H1 through to H6. And if you click on any of these, then it brings up actually the MDN documentation. So you can see that it's similar to what we saw in MDN, but it's just structured in a very simple way, and it's very easy to follow. So that's definitely a website that's worth bookmarking. So if we head back over to our HTML file, we're going to change that back to an H3, which is an HTML tag that actually exists, as opposed to something like H9. So the next thing that we need to do in order to better replicate this website is to add some space between these lines. Now, in a word processor such as Word or Google Docs, you'll be able to simply just hit enter a few times or hit return a few times and get that spacing show up. Now, unfortunately, in HTML, it doesn't quite work like that. It's a little bit more complicated. In order to create that spacing, we actually have to use an HTML element called a line break, and it's written like so. And the interesting thing about this HTML element is that it doesn't require both an open and a close tag. So when we had the H1 through to H6 tags, you can see that we started out by marking the text with an H1, and then we closed it off with a closing tag. But the line break element works all by itself, and you can even put it inside like so to make this part go onto a new line. Now, this is a good time point to review the anatomy of HTML tags.
All right. So she gave me quite a bit of resources on that one. I should probably create a folder for it, because I'm probably going to need this stuff throughout the entire one. I don't typically use Chrome, but I have to use it for this one. So I don't really want to save the tags on it because of that. But if I keep it pinned, then on this computer it should it'll just save it. And since I don't use Chrome on my other computers, then I shouldn't have any problems. So I should be able to just return to this. If not, I'm fairly certain I can just look at that little thing she gave me. Where is it? There we go. Not this. Not this. But this. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I use this at work all the time. But this stuff right here. So I'll hold on to this, and then I can come back to it in case I somehow lose it. So here we go. Let's get on to the next 10 minutes here.
So let's talk about the anatomy of an HTML tag and break it down to its component parts so that we can actually understand how they're structured and how we can use them. So we've written HTML elements like so. So here we have the words hello world, and they're enclosed by an opening tag and a closing tag. And in between those tags is the content that we want to apply that structure to. So if you think back to the days of marking down a manuscript, it's exactly the same as putting down a squiggly line underneath certain words or phrases and asking the publisher to make it bolded to affect the structure of certain parts of the text. Now in this case, the publisher just happens to be our browser. So these tags make requests to the browser asking it to structure and display our plain text in the way that the web designer wanted it to be shown. Now, the other type of tag that we just saw are tags that don't have a closing tag. They're expressed simply like so. And these are called self-closing tags. And we've seen that with the break tag, and there's a few more others that work like this also. Now, how do we find out if something requires a closing tag or is self-closing? Well, this is where we head to the documentation again. So if we have a look at the documentation for the heading elements, you can see that there's this part in the table that says tag omission, and it says that both the starting and ending tags are mandatory so that you can specify which portion of your text you want to apply this structure to. Now, if we have a look at the BR or the line break element, you can see that under tag omission, it says that it must have a start tag and must not have an end tag. So this is how we find out how we write our tags. Now, while we're here, I want to introduce you to another element called the horizontal rule, or the HR tag. And this will allow us to create these horizontal lines above and below our portion of text. So as you can see in the documentation, under tag omission, it also says that it must not have an end tag. So this is also a self-closing tag. Let's head back over to our pen so that we can add these two horizontal rules above and below our text. So the first one is going to go here, and the last one is going to go here. You can see that our web page now has two horizontal lines above and below our main portion of text. Now, if we have a closer look at this website, you can see that their horizontal rule is a little bit thicker than ours. So how can we make ours look more like theirs? Now, this is the part where I show you a neat trick. On any web page that you open in Chrome, you can simply right-click on the element that you're interested in and click Inspect in order to look at the HTML and CSS code that's being rendered in the background by the browser. So you can see here, they've got an HR element, horizontal rule, but they've got also all of this going on afterwards. What exactly is that? Now, we know that the first part of the tag is the HTML element, and it's BR or HR, whatever it is that you want to use. Now, the second part inside the angle bracket or inside our tag is new, and this is called an HTML attribute, and it basically gives more information to the browser to specify modifications to that HTML element. So in this case, we're saying that we want a horizontal rule, but we want it in size 3. Now, what does size 3 mean, and how do we know that we have these HTML attributes available to us? You've guessed it, we're going back to the documentation. Now, I know I'm making a big deal about going to the documentation, but it really is an important skill. Understanding and being able to look up the documentation, being familiar with the structure of it and where to look in order to find out how to implement or do certain things. If we have a look at our documentation for HR,
I think this code might be a little bit dated.
Attributes, and that's what we spoke about just now. The attribute comes after the main HTML element and is separated from the element by a single space. In this case, the horizontal rule element has actually quite a few attributes, including a line, so you can specify whether if you want your horizontal line to align to the left or align to the right or be centered. You can specify the color of the horizontal rule. You can set whether if you want the horizontal rule to have shading or not, and you can also set the height in pixels of that horizontal rule, which is what we saw earlier on over here. So in this case, the reason why their horizontal rule looks different to ours is because ours is by default only 1 pixel high or 1 pixel in size, whereas theirs, if you inspect in the HTML, is 3 pixels in height. And they've also specified no shade, i.e. no shading to the horizontal rule. So if we want to make our website a seamless copy of what we see here, then we also have to specify those attributes. So if you remember, the horizontal rule is a self-closing tag. And so inside the tag, we're going to make a space, and then we're going to specify the name of the attribute, which we know from the documentation to be called the size attribute. And we're going to set it to equal 3 pixels. And then we're going to specify that it is no shade, i.e. no shading. And we know all of this from the documentation. So now, once our code updates, you can see that this brand new horizontal rule looks completely different from what it was before, and we can copy this over to the top as well, so that our horizontal rules look exactly the same as what we've got over here. So now we've seen HTML elements that require an opening tag as well from what it was before, and we can copy this over to the top as well, so that our
I kind of missed a little bit of that. I'm not really sure where she's going with it. Like, I understand HTML to a certain degree, but I feel like this is a bit, you know, I want to say like, I don't know that it's advanced, but at the same time, it's kind of like, yeah, it looks cool.
horizontal rules look exactly the same as what we've got over here. So now we've seen HTML elements that require an opening tag as well as a closing tag. We've also seen HTML elements that have a self-closing tag. And finally, we've seen that HTML elements can also have an attribute where you can specify modifications to the default element. Now, all we need is just to add one final tag called center to our HTML file, and we would have now faithfully copied what this website looks like. So you can have a look through the HTML by, remember, right-clicking and inspecting in Chrome, and you can look through to see how they've structured the rest of the document as well. Now, this is a good point to mention our first challenge. So we've got this Codepen now where we've been messing around with the HTML. Now you can either save this anonymously, or you can create a free account in Codepen in order to be able to access this later on. But I want you to create a brand new pen, and this pen is going to be our code playbook. And you're going to use this document as an interactive notebook, if you will. And I want you to document here all the new things that you've learned as.
All right, I'm gonna pull that over there and create a new account on it. Yep. What should I choose as a username? That's a tough one. Let's just do Don's. Just use one Don Solo. It's easy. Nope, nope, nope. That's an odd password to remember. There we go. All right, cool. Saved it. And she says create a new one. Yeah. How exactly do? Ooh, cool. New pen. All right, let's go.
As we progress through the course. For example, in this and the last lesson, we learn about the H1 tag. So in our code playbook, the first thing that's going to go in is your H1 tag. And you can say that this is a level 1 heading created using the H1 tag. You can go ahead and close it off. And you can look through the documentation to perhaps copy some of these code snippets over, but make sure that whenever you're copying and pasting code, that you understand what the code does. There's nothing worse than copy and pasting code that breaks your website because you didn't understand what you've put in there. So we can go ahead and then modify each of these so that when we're creating our own websites and we want to come back to our playbook and have it as a point of reference, then we'll be able to see easily at a glance all of the elements that we've used and that we've learned about before. So my challenge to you is to create your very own code playbook and to start keeping notes on all the things that you're learning in this course. Now, sometimes with certain elements, for example, the line break, you won't be able to put any text inside the line break in the same way that we've done so for the h1 tag. This is a point where you can use a comment instead in your HTML file. Comments are portions of text which are marked out to be ignored by the browser. And they're usually places where you write notes to yourself or notes to fellow programmers who might be looking at your code. So in HTML, we create a comment by using the angle bracket, a exclamation mark, 2 dashes, and then to close off the comment, we use another 2 dashes and a closing angle bracket. And everything in between here is a comment. You can see that usually it gets highlighted in a different color and none of it gets interpreted into the web page. So this is where you can put sections for your notes, for example, self-closing tags. You can make it into several paragraphs just by putting the closing tag at the bottom, and you can write notes on the elements as we come across them and keep this for your own reference. By the time when you're ready to create your own websites, it will be a goldmine of a resource to jog your memory on all of the lessons that you've learned. So in the next lesson, we're going to be building our very first website. And it's going to be really, really awesome because we're going to be using a real text editor and we're going to be putting that website live onto the internet. So there's all of that and more yet to come. So I will see you on the next lesson.
All right, let's see what we got.
All right, so in this lesson, we're going to be building our very first website. Now, because we've only talked about HTML so far, so how to structure websites using HTML elements, and we haven't yet gotten to the part where we've learned about styling using CSS, then we're kind of limited in terms of the kind of websites that we can make. But fear not, our websites are going to be right up there with the Internet Titans, but just way back in 1997. So do you remember what Yahoo looked like when it first launched? Or do you remember what Google looked like when it first came out? No? Don't remember? Well, there's a great website that can show you exactly that. And it's called the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. And you can find it at web.archive.org. Now in here, if you just enter the URL of a website that you're interested in, say, yep.
So I use this website at work a lot when people like forget to pay their bills or manage to completely annihilate their website. This website, the Wayback Machine, is really good for showing this. Now, it also serves the purpose of showing people that their website hadn't been up for a long time or it wasn't functioning for a long time. It has its limitations. As like it has to take these pictures. It's not doing it like every day. It only does it every now and then. So there's been occasions where I wasn't able to find the website because it was never recorded by it. So it's a pretty good tool for even outside of web dev.
Yahoo.com. Then it shows you what this website looks like all the way from 1996 to current day, which is 2017. Now let's have a look at what Yahoo looked like originally on the first day it was crawled, so 17th of October 1996. So let's go ahead and click on that snapshot, and this is exactly what it looks like. So if we close off this frame, you can see it's almost like as if you've time traveled back to 1996 when Yahoo first launched and you were visiting this website for the first time. Now, as you can see, most of this is just pure HTML. It's a lot of structure and a lot of formatting, but it looks really ugly. But it's okay, because it's a great place to get started with. This is the sort of website that we're going to be building by the end of this module. Now I hear you say, oh, but this looks terrible. Surely nobody builds websites like this anymore. Well, this is an interesting anecdote that you might not know. If you have a look at some of the world's top computer science professors and you look at their personal pages that they've built, they all look a little bit like this, not so dissimilar from the websites in 1996. So this is Thomas Corman, who's a serious algorithm guy, and this is a website of John Kleinberg, another huge name computer science professor, and of course the king himself, Donald Knuth, has a website that looks like this. So if it's good enough for these computer science titans, then it's probably good enough also for our very first website. By the end of this module, we're going to build a website that looks much like this. Something that we can put up online to show what we've done, our CV, as well as our hobbies and things that we like to do. So you can use it as a personal site or somewhere to list your CV online. I hope you're excited because I'm super excited. And once you're ready, let's go ahead and create our very first website.
Whee!
Now, once you're ready, go ahead and open up the Atom editor. Now, if you haven't yet installed Atom, this is a good point to go back and have a look at those videos on how to install Atom for Mac or for Windows. Because from here on out, we're going to be working with the Atom editor to create every single one of our websites. So it's really, really important that you have it set up with all the packages that we've specified in those installation videos. But once you've got it installed and open, you should be looking at a screen like this. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to File and we're going to open a new project folder to work out of. So I want you to create a new folder either in your desktop or somewhere else that you prefer, and it's going to be called Web Development. Go ahead and hit Create and then select that Web Development folder and go ahead and click Open. And now you'll see your project folder show up in the sidebar over here. And you can toggle it closed by clicking on that arrow button over there. So now that we've got our web development folder, this is where we're going to store all of our projects. The first project that we're going to be creating is our personal website. So go ahead and right click on the web development folder, and we're going to create a new folder looking at a screen like this. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to File and we're going to open a new project folder to work out of. So I want you to create a new folder either in your desktop or somewhere else that you prefer, and it's going to be called Web Development. Go ahead and hit Create and then select that Web Development folder and go ahead and click Open. And now you'll see your project folder show up in the sidebar over here, and you can toggle it closed by clicking on that arrow button over there. So now that we've got our web development folder, this is where we're going to store all of our projects. The first project that we're going to be creating is our personal website. So go ahead and right click on the web development folder, and we're going to create a new folder inside the web development folder. And we're going to call our project HTML personal site. And now we're ready to create our very first HTML file inside this folder. So again, right click on this tab and we're going to create a new file. Now, as you get used to Atom, you're going to start to want to use some of their shortcuts. So for example, instead of right clicking and selecting new file, you can also just simply select the HTML personal site and hit A in order to do the same thing. But in the beginning, as you're getting used to Atom, I'm going to be using a lot of the mouse controls so that you can see what's happening on screen. But feel free to start incorporating the shortcuts into your workflow. And as time goes on, you'll find that they make life so much quicker and so much easier. So now we're going to create our very first file. And you can see the way that the files are structured is that we're creating it inside this folder called HTML personal site. And inside that folder is where our web page is going to be located. Let's go ahead and create this home page, and by convention we're going to name it index.html, and that is usually the name that developers will give their home page. So go ahead and hit enter in order to create that file, and if you open up this folder you can see that's exactly where it's located, and it should open up on the right hand or the main pane over here as well. Now, in order to create any HTML website, there's a little bit of boilerplate code that's associated. Now you can either write it all out, or because we installed the Emmet plugin, we can simply write HTML and then hit enter, and it will insert all of that boilerplate code for us. Now, if that didn't work for you, you could also hit the tab key after writing HTML, or typing an exclamation mark and then hitting the tab or the enter key. Try some of these combinations that you see on screen if it's not working for you. And you're going to come to see and appreciate all the powers of the Atom plugins and how helpful they can be. So now we mentioned that this is a standard HTML boilerplate code. Now in programming, we talk about boilerplates quite frequently, and it's similar to having a code template, something that you'll reuse for different projects. And it comes from the days when the printing press would make these heavy iron plates that would function as their printing template. And because they looked very similar to the small metal plate that identified the builder of a steam boiler, they called it the boilerplate. That's just where this word comes from. But when we're talking about it in programming, we usually mean a code template that you can reuse. Now, even though we didn't have to do very much work in order to get all of this into our file, it would still be a shame to lose it, right? So in Atom, whenever you see a blue dot on the tab bar of your file, that means that there's unsaved progress. And in order to make it disappear and to keep your progress, you can simply go to File and then click on Save, or use whatever shortcut that shows up for you over here. It should be Command S on Mac, and it should be Control S on Windows. For those of you who are interested, I've included a link to some of the most commonly used Atom keyboard shortcuts, and includes the commands for both Mac, Windows, and Linux for users of all three platforms. So go and have a look over there and start learning and using some of these shortcuts. And once you've saved your file in Atom, you'll see that little blue dot disappear, and now you can be rest assured that all your progress has now been safely saved. Now there's quite a lot of stuff on the screen, so let's talk about this boilerplate line by line to understand what it all does. So the first line here is where we declare the document type, and this tells the browser when it opens up this file what is the version of HTML that we're using. Now in this course, we're working with the latest version of HTML, which is HTML5. Now in previous versions of HTML, this doc type was incredibly convoluted. And in fact, I can show you what some of them look like. So we can write HTML for T, for example. And then because we've installed Emmet, if I hit tab, you can see this is what the boilerplate code for a particular HTML4 version would look like. And you can see that doc type is a lot longer, and very often programmers won't be able to remember that, so they actually have to look it up somewhere. But since HTML5, the doc type declaration became a lot simpler, and now it's just exclamation mark doc type HTML, and this tells the browser to render this file as an HTML5 document. And there's a few differences between how things will appear and how things will be structured, depending on whether if the doc type was HTML5.
So a lot of the customers that I work with at work, you see this a lot for the people who don't use like WordPress, or may have put a WordPress site across the old HTML site. And I didn't realize that it was defining as HTML4, HTML5, or anything like that, because I've never been an HTML guy. So that's pretty interesting to know. So learn a little bit at a time. It feels like it's a little slow. I would rather be coding a bit more, but you have to have the fundamentals, I guess. And by the time I finish with this, I should be building a pretty crappy looking CV page that I will never use. However, I guess it would be really good for reference to other projects.
Or a previous version. So that's the doc type. Now we inserted all of this code using autocomplete from Emmet. And if you want to look at all the other things that you can do with Emmet, then you can go ahead and have a look at docs.emmet.io/cheat sheet. And here you can see what all of those abbreviations look like and what is the result of it. As you're developing into a professional web developer, it's a great resource to have in order to save yourself a lot of time when you get used to using these common shortcuts. Now the next line in our code is an HTML tag. And this tells the browser that everything in between the opening and closing tags is going to be HTML code. And what does that code consist of? Well, it consists of a head and a body. Now, the head is the part of the HTML file that holds information about the web page, and it tells the browser how it should handle the page. So, for example, we might have a title tag in here that tells the browser what is the title of this particular document or this particular page. So let's go ahead and give our website a title. Let's call it whatever your name is. So mine is Angela, Angela's personal site. And now if we go ahead and hit save, we can have a look at it inside our browser. Now there's a couple of ways how you can open up the website that you're coding up inside your browser. Now one of these ways is simply going into your Finder or your Explorer and finding that index.html file and then double clicking on it, and it should bring it up inside Chrome. Now the other way of opening up your website is if you right click on your file inside Atom and you go to copy full path, then it copies the entire directory path to the location of your website. So if you just go ahead and paste it into the bar here, and here with this file path, we're telling the browser how to find this file index.html on our computer. So first we're telling it to go into a folder called users, then we're telling it to go into a folder called Angela U, then we're saying go to desktop, and then inside desktop we're going to web development, and finally we're going to HTML-personal site, and that is where we're going to find that index.html site. Let's go ahead and hit enter on that file path in order to do exactly the same as double clicking on this file, which is opening up our website inside Chrome. Now if Chrome is not your default browser, then when you see the icon, it's not going to have the Chrome symbol here. So you can change that by going into your settings, then scrolling down to default browser in order to change it. Now, at the moment, our website doesn't contain any content yet, but it does have a title, which you can see here, and it says Angela's personal site,
Nice.
which is what we created over here. Now, inside the head section, there's also this meta element. Now, there's quite a few different meta elements, but this particular one is called character set, and the one that we're setting it to is UTF-8. Now, what does this line do? The meta elements give extra metadata or associated data to your HTML document. And in this case, we're telling the browser when it opens up this file that all the text inside our web page is encoded using the UTF-8 encoding system. So this is basically a list of all the available characters that we can use inside our website for it to be rendered correctly. Now sometimes when you open up a web page, especially in an outdated browser like Internet Explorer, or an email that you got from a Bulgarian friend, you might see some of the characters being jumbled up like this. And this is called Mojibaki. And it's a Japanese word that stands for characters that are transformed. And it occurs because your browser is trying to render the characters using the wrong character set. So for example, if we have a look at this Wikipedia page for Mojibaki in Japanese, you can see that currently my browser is set to render all the web pages as Unicode, which is very similar to UTF-8. And you can see that everything looks pretty legit. It all looks more or less like Japanese. But if I decide to change the encoding of my browser and for it to interpret all the websites as something else, say Arabic, then you can see that all of this web page is now messed up. This is not a valid word, and none of this has any meaning because it's encoded the website incorrectly. So there's quite a few different types of encoding, and they're specialized for different languages because different languages use different symbols. For example, if you have a look at the Windows Greek symbol chart, then you can see that the symbol at position 224 looks like this, but But if you have a look at the chart for Windows Arabic, then 224 actually encodes a completely different character. And that's why we get these messed up websites or strange looking emails when it's interpreted using the wrong encoding. Now, UTF-8 is the standard encoding that you should be using when working with HTML5. And the reason for that is because it includes all of those international symbols. And in fact, every single symbol that is included in the Unicode character set. So if you go to unicode-table.com, then you can see a table of all of the Unicode characters. And if you scroll down, it's got this nice little animation that shows you as we change locations, going from Latin, so most of the English-speaking countries, to Greek and Coptic, then going to Armenian, Hebrew, Arabic, and all of the different languages. The other thing about Unicode is that it also includes emojis. For example, if you have a look at the emoji chart, let's look for heart symbols, for example, then we've got all of these different...
Honestly, like, I think there's a lot of fluff right now. Honestly, like, it's useful information, but at this point, since I'm just trying to learn how to code, tell me to use UTF-8, and then maybe revisit Unicode like later, because if I'm not going to be using it in this current whatever it is we're about to do, then it's like falling on deaf ears mostly. Like, the only thing I need to know is that I need to be on UTF-8. So it's kind of fluff, and it's a little bit boring just to, like, okay, this is where emojis are and this is where this stuff is. Like, let's make the web page. I would say, so that's where I'm kind of at right now. It's a little exhausting she's just kind of rambling on about something that's, I would say it's irrelevant, because it's not irrelevant, but at the same time it's not pertinent to exactly what we're doing. Like right now, we started coding out, and then she started kind of breaking down the stuff to the boilerplate is the term she used. The stuff to the boilerplate, she started breaking that down, which is fine. All of that's very important. But now getting this deep into Unicode when I'm not using Unicode, it's a little, she's just kind of droning on with it. So it feels a little fluff. I mean, I've worked on this free code camp, free code academy before a while ago, and it moved a lot faster than this. So this has been close to an hour. I've opened up a ton of resources, and I've installed Atom and started working on an index file, which is cool. But at this point, like, let's code and then backfill maybe, because all of this is just going to start to overwhelm me unless I'm physically using Unicode. Just tell me UTF-8 and we can go from there.
Emoji characters that we can also use on our website that's encoded with UTF-8. So let's go ahead and give that a try. Let's find a nice looking heart symbol. We can right click to copy it, or hit Command C or Control C, and we can paste it to the front of our website title using Control V or Command V. And now if I hit save and go back to my website and hit Command R or Control R to refresh, or click this refresh button here, then you can see our title is updated with that emoji. So everything that is Unicode can be encoded correctly using UTF-8, and it's something that you should just have as your boilerplate code for any new website you create. This gives your website the maximum chance of being rendered correctly on browsers that are from international visitors. Now, if you're interested in doing a bit of background reading and learning more about Unicode and character sets, then this is a really good piece that I highly recommend by Joel Spolsky. It's a roughly 10-minute read, And it talks a lot about these character sets and how they encode different symbols and why you should be using something like Unicode or UTF-8 in your websites in order to ensure maximum compatibility. So it's a good read, and I'll include a link to it in the resources for this lesson. Now, aside from the character set attribute for the meta element, there's also other attributes that you might see on different websites. So some of the common ones include description, or things like keywords about your website, who the author is, as well as viewport. And these meta tags tell the browser how it should render or display the web page. And also, they give information to search engines about the content of the website. So for example, if we go to the Mozilla MDN WebDocs website, the main page, developer.mozilla.org, and we right-click and we view page source, then we get to see the entire HTML file that's used to render this particular page. So this is what our browser sees and does all the hard work of making it look nice and pretty like this for us. So here, if you go ahead and hit Command F or Control F on Windows, you can search for the description attribute. Now, it's not this first one, but it is this third one, and it's this exact thing. And the description says, the Mozilla Developer Network, MDN, provides information about open web technologies, including HTML, CSS, and APIs. Now, if we go into Google and we search for MDN, you can see that the snippet of text that it shows about the main MDN website is exactly the same as what we saw just here in the description meta tag. And this is what search engines do. They crawl the HTML of your website and look for certain meta tags in order to know what your website is about and also how to display it in their search index. And there's a whole bunch of different attributes for the meta element, and you can have a read about it either on W3 Schools, or what I recommend usually is the MDN WebDocs. So if you have a look at meta over here, then you can learn all about the different attributes, how to use them, and what they're good for. In the next lesson, we're going to be tapping into our body section, and we're going to be creating the content for this personal site of ours. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson. So Alright, so in the last lesson, we learned
jumped across a few. So it looks like there's
now
still.
that we understand how.
So it looks like there's still quite a few in this particular setup here. It looks like there's quite a few in here. Now, I think like with this one, it moves a little slow, opposed to like what I'm used to, which is fine. There's more, like I was anticipating more coding opposed to tons and tons of explanation about, things that are unnecessary. I mean, and that's just my opinion. I don't know if it was to kind of fluff out the course because it's 55 hours. So, and that was like 10 minutes of, well, way more than 10 minutes because we haven't really done anything since. Like the boilerplate, we just dropped something in. Then the intro was like 10 minutes. So it has a lot going on, but there's so much talking. I wasn't anticipating as much talking as opposed to what the code does, because it's not like HTML, that isn't necessarily like Python or JavaScript or something where I need to be concerned about execution. With HTML, it's more like just getting the stuff in there and then going into design off of CSS. So I think I spend a lot of time on what should be relatively simple and quick and straightforward, listening to history. So I don't know. Maybe if you're a web developer or something like that, and you went through that and all of this may be relevant and I'm just wrong. It's possible. I'm not a web dev. But I don't really see the value in 17 minutes of structuring or listening to stuff about Unicode and things right now. I would rather just be straight up coding and then backfilling that information, because like I said, like the stream is only like an hour. The course would take, say, is about an hour, 19 minutes with me kind of pausing every now and then. So I think I'll probably extend my normal ones out to about an hour and 30 to give time for commentary, as well as doing whatever it is that they're saying to do. But that's basically going to be it for the night. I'm going to go ahead and finish off the rest of it tomorrow, and then call it a day. Hopefully we can be into section 3 by Thursday, and that looks like that's about an hour. Section 4 is a little longer. Section 5 is a little longer. So these are probably going to be sections that I'll go through on live stream on a Saturday or a Friday or a Saturday during the day, because if it's 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours. So a lot of this stuff is smaller, but the 2 hour stuff I want to bust through on weekends, because I don't want to really take a break. Maybe do what's it called, Pomodoros for it. But that's basically going to be it for tonight. Thanks for anyone who popped into the stream. These are probably going to be about an hour and 30 minutes. And then I think like next week what I'll do is I'll do a video at the end of the week or something like that. Just more concise, or the next day just a short video about what I went over the day before, and see if it builds into the next day. And then the way that I want to kind of stagger it is I want to be working the web development bootcamp like 3 or 4 days, 3 days out of the week, and I want to be working the Python bootcamp the rest of the days, because I do enjoy Python way more than I enjoy listening about HTML. And who knows, like I might get into CSS and really like CSS. So, or obviously, like I'm really excited about getting into the JavaScript as well when that time comes. But as of now, we have to battle through this HTML. And it looks like I have roughly about 2 hours left of it, and then I'm into JavaScript. I'm into CSS, and I don't know CSS. So that should be a lot more interesting, while HTML, like I said, is pretty cut and dry. So I will catch you guys tomorrow. Stream time is usually going to be around 8:30 to 9:30. Maybe I might end up pushing it out to 10, and some days I might actually go till 11, depending on what the content is and if it's interesting enough. But I did do her Python course, and her Python course started it, and the Python course is amazing. Maybe I mixed this with some free Code Academy or something to just kind of spice it up and double up on the concepts. So you have that reinforcement. It's kind of like, I learned some stuff here and then redo it over in Code Academy, so that I have that redundancy, because here it doesn't seem to be giving me redundancy. It's basically just introducing it to me. And I don't see like later in the course where I'm working on it. Maybe it's in the maybe it's going to be in the projects, but we'll see. But that's basically going to be it for tonight. I will see, or whenever you're seeing this video, I'll see you guys on tomorrow, same time. These videos do stay up on my channel as live stream, so there's not a whole ton going on besides, especially on these earlier videos, besides me getting to the meat and potatoes. I do anticipate, like when the projects come, that I'm just gonna do a project video and label it as a project video, opposed to taking everyone through all of the extra talk and text. But I will catch you guys later. Good night.